Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Dynasty Warriors. Dynasty Warriors is a Hong Kong-produced action movie based on the video game series of the same name, and tells the story of a group of heroes that joins forces with an army of rebels in an attempt to bring the Han Dynasty of China back into power. Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Zhang Fei are the three main characters of the story, and they all join forces with this group of governors that are convened together at a conference of sorts, and they all have the same goal in mind, which is to overthrow the current reigning emperor in power, Dong Zhou. But overthrowing Dong Zhou and bringing the Han Emperor back into power won't be easy, as he has the largest military presence in all of China, and it's all commanded under the rule of his right-hand man, Liu Bu, who it seems he has a long-standing history with the three other characters that I mentioned earlier, and generally after that conference is done is whenever the rest of the movie takes place, although there's a lot of stuff that happens before that as well that helps to set things up. I've never played a Dynasty Warriors game before, although I am familiar with the series due to having played games in the Samurai Warriors series, its Japanese counterpart, in the past, but even despite that, I found that the characters in this movie had very little in the way of personality. Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Zhang Fei, who are supposed to be the main characters of the story, are simply unremarkable. Each one is just as bland as the other. If it hadn't been for the costume, the makeup, and the weapons they were wielding, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. To be fair, there are a few cool things about them. Liu Bei seems to have a bit more backstory compared to the other characters, Guan Yu has a very impressive fight scene about halfway through the movie, and Zhang Fei just has a really cool visual design about him. But aside from those things, the main characters of the story just aren't all that memorable. Cao Cao, on the other hand, was much better in terms of personality by comparison. He's one of the leading generals of the military powers that are gathering together to try and overthrow Dong Zhou, and he just has a really humorous personality about the whole thing. He's always cracking jokes at other people's expense. And on top of all of this, he has a lot more backstory than any other character in this movie, which enables the audience to get some insights as to what his motivations are for wanting to overthrow Dong Zhou. In the same token, I also thought that Liu Bu was a decent character. Not amazing by any means, but he has a lot more presence compared to any other character in this movie. You just take one look at him and the stern expression on his face, and you know that he means business. At the same time, however, he doesn't come across as someone who's just being evil for the sake of being evil, more so as someone who's just doing what he's told to do and what he feels is the right thing to do in the first place. Specifically, there's a special scene that happens about halfway through this movie's story that for me completely humanized Liu Bu, not just as a villain, but as a character in general. By and large, the characters are a pretty mixed bag. However, anyone who's ever played a Musou-style video game before, like Samurai Warriors or Dynasty Warriors, will know that the characters are just the tip of the iceberg. It's the action sequences that are the main star of the show, but in the case of the movie, it's not always the best. Ignoring the logic of the superpowers and how the characters exactly came across them in the first place, the computer-generated special effects in this movie are pretty bad. Some of the Musou powers do look visually impressive, but whenever you got a million bodies that are floating around all discombobulated and pixelated on the screen, it's hard to take the whole sequence seriously. There's one action scene in particular that really stuck out like a sore thumb to me. All of it is computer-generated from beginning to end, and all of it looks terrible. I was utterly shocked at what I was watching on screen, and I could not believe that it made it into the final cut of this movie. Aside from the CG stuff, there's also a lot of good old-fashioned brawls in this movie, both with fists and with stylized weapons that are trademarks of the Warrior series at large, and those parts are great. There's a lot of creative choreography involved with them, and lots of little neat camera techniques that play tricks on the audience's eyes. I also think the filmmakers did a great job representing the size and the scale of the battles in this movie, similar to how they were in the video games. There's always a ton of people on screen no matter where the action takes place, and even though the special effects don't always look convincing, you get a general sense that there is a massive war at play before you with even more colossal stakes behind them. So again, as with the characters, the action scenes are a bit of a mixed bag. What ruins them for me in this movie though is the editing. It is straight up some of the worst editing that I have ever seen in an action movie to date. I don't know why this is still a thing in movies today, but for some reason this movie features more than a handful of sequences that have stuttering slow-mo effects effects as opposed to the more smooth and flowing sequences that we're used to seeing in action movies today. It just looks terrible to see on camera. It looks tacky, it makes the movie appear old and dated, and on top of that, it makes the action scenes more difficult to follow along. It just looks awful. There are also a lot of smash cuts with the camera in this movie that were really annoying to put up with. They always seem to occur just when the action was starting to get really good and intense. You might be getting used to the flow of the whole sequence, and then all of a sudden it cuts back and forth between random things and you have no idea what's going on. It's disorienting, it's annoying, and it adds nothing to the movie. Finally, there's the story of the movie itself, which I'm not going to spend too much time talking about simply because I don't remember everything that happened in this movie, and quite honestly, I find that to be a flaw in the movie itself because its pacing is all over the place. The first 20 minutes or so of this movie are great. It opens up with a cheesy but entertaining action sequence that's characteristic of the Warrior series overall, but after that, it feels like the movie just totally goes to sleep for the next 30 to 40 minutes as characters mostly spend that time just talking to each other and then traveling long distances across China, and then they talk again to another character. I won't bore you with the full details of the whole thing, but there's a lot of political ramblings involved and exposition about things and then meetings about random stuff between characters, and it's all just so boring to sit through. I'm sorry for anyone who's a fan of the Dynasty Warriors series, but these parts of the movie were just not fun at all to watch. And after all of that is all said and done, you get an ending that doesn't even feel like an ending. In fact, I'm going to go as far as to say that the ending for this movie is completely unfinished. Whatever's there at the end of this movie didn't feel like a proper conclusion whatsoever. Again, I'm not going to spoil that part for anyone who does want to watch this movie, although I will say that the ending is literally featured in the trailer. And based on experiences that I've had in the past, any movie that has had the balls to feature the ending of the movie in the trailer itself was never a good movie to begin with. Overall, Dynasty Warriors was a complete disappointment for me. Like I said, I don't know if this is being faithful to the games or not. It looks like it's being faithful based on the costumes that characters wear and the overall setting of the whole thing, but in the end it amounted to little more than being a total snooze fest. The only people that I think could appreciate this movie in full would be those who are hardcore fans of the Dynasty Warriors series, and even then I think that's a bit of a stretch. As good and entertaining as some of the action scenes were in this movie, the special effects hamper their potential, and when you combine that with lackluster characters and a boring story, you end up with an unpleasant cinematic experience. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of Dynasty Warriors. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review part 1 of R.L. Stine's horror trilogy, Fear Street 1994. Bye bye!